recruits watched, the disengaged cargo hold full of star-drive fuel tumbled away from the sky mine and plunged into the ocean of colored gases. The roamers repeatedly tried to surrender, but the aliens refused to respond. They just attacked. Shireen Pasternak. Now Tasya remembered the woman's name. The Weller chief had met sometimes with Ross. Now they were both victims of the new enemies. Stromo fell silent again, while in the image the habitation dome detached from the sky mine. Tasya knew that such an action would have been the chief's absolute last resort, a decision no roamer captain would make unless she was convinced all hope was gone. Observe. Even when the sky mine captain tried to evacuate her crew, the aliens came after her, intentionally and maliciously. In the projected images, the predatory crystalline spheres blasted the habitation module into molten shrapnel, and then returned without hurry to chop up the rest of the cloud-harvesting facility, leaving the debris to tumble down into the clouds. All hands lost. Tasya swallowed hard, driving down the anger and impatience to do something. She hated just sitting here on Mars. Several of the roamer scout ships remained aloft for a week, trying to survive in the upper atmosphere of Weller, Stromo finally said. Those vessels recorded the images you just saw, but they did not have sufficient life support resources or long-range capabilities. When rescue finally arrived, there were no survivors aboard. Rob Brindle looked at Tasya, knowing the pain she felt. He reached out to squeeze her hand, but she barely felt it. Her fingers were ice-cold. The images stopped. "That is all," Stromo said. "Raw data, with no conclusions. Our experts are studying these recordings and will give you further intelligence as it arrives." The light on the stage faded, and the Admiral said, "Dismissed." Tasya barely said a word as they filed back toward their barracks. Rob Brindle walked beside her in silence, giving his quiet support. She hoped he understood how much she appreciated it. By now he knew better than to try and cheer her up or engage her in innocuous conversation. As they entered the communal room near the lockers and sleeping quarters, Patrick Fitzpatrick pointedly looked at Tasya and turned away, raising his voice to his companions. "Hey, at least it was only roachers who got killed." He reveled in his callous wisecrack. "Next time, though, it might be real people." Tasya bristled. Rob stepped in front of her and glowered at the young man. "Hey, vacuum brain, maybe you missed the briefing where they told us who the real enemy is." "Ah, shut up, Brindle," Fitzpatrick said, annoyed that the young black man would take sides against him. Rob shook his head. "Your stupidity is more dangerous than those aliens are." With exaggerated patience and a steel-hard smile, Tasya touched Rob on the shoulder. "Thanks, Brindle. It's nice to have a shining knight, but I have my own suit of armor, and it's pretty damn tough." She stepped around him toward the sarcastic trainee. "You have two choices, Klebe. Either apologize or go to the infirmary." Fitzpatrick just laughed at her. Therefore, he had chosen the infirmary. Tasya used the low Mars gravity to her advantage and launched her full body weight at him, swinging simultaneously with both fists to hammer his jaw and the top of his head. She sent him into the metal wall, kicked off from Fitzpatrick's chest, and heard a few ribs crack as she bounced away and rebounded from the ceiling. Tasya didn't waste her breath, concentrating all of her energy into knees, elbows, feet, and fists. The sarcastic young recruit fought back ineffectively, as if he'd always had other people around to protect him. Tasya smacked him hard in the nose, a choice blow that caused blood to spout from his nostrils. The gushing scarlet seemed to strip all the bravado from Fitzpatrick. As if Tasya were a matador waving a red cape, his friends joined in against her, punching from behind, landing a hard blow across the back of her head. Outnumbered, she whirled to face the new antagonists, never backing down. So Rob Brindle was drawn into the fray after all. Both Tasya and Fitzpatrick ended up in the infirmary with bruises, contusions, cuts, and a few cracked bones. She found it ironic that she was tended by her own compy, who had been upgraded with first-aid programming to make her more useful at the base. Both recruits received disciplinary censures, which meant nothing to her, but she could see from the squirming uneasiness on the spoiled trainee's face that he was more afraid of his rich parents than of any damage it might do to his military career. Tasia was released from the infirmary 2 full days ahead of Patrick Fitzpatrick III. Both of her brothers would have been proud of her. Chapter 81. Benito. Because Corvus Landing was so far from any heavily populated Hansa colonies, Benito's roundabout passage took more than a month. The time gave old Talbot the opportunity to tidy up all the matters in his life. Carrying a small potted treeling so that he could remain connected to the world forest on the long journey, Benito traveled on 3 different ships, transferring from a passenger vessel to a merchant ship and then to a freelance explorer before he finally arrived at his new home. He landed at Colony Town, accompanied by cargo containers, crowded cages of noisy and uneasy livestock, supplies, and equipment, as well as special gifts from Theroc. Content and smiling, Benito stepped out and breathed the strange air, smelling the fragrances of an untamed world where Terran agriculture was only beginning to secure a stable foothold. Corvus Landing was a young, geologically quiescent planet with a generally mild climate and minimal native vegetation. Even the seas were shallow, and the landforms were smooth, with nothing more extreme than hilly plains. Dazzled by the clear sunlight without the shade of a dense forest canopy, Benito drank in the details, felt the sunlight tingle his exposed green skin. Through the information he'd learned via Telink, he knew that fierce storms occasionally whipped the land with hurricane-force winds that crossed the open plains. Tapping into memories related by Talbot, Benito experienced one of these tempests second-hand, seen through the eyes of the local world forest grove. In consideration of the weather, Colony Town's shelters were low aerodynamic structures. The agricultural grid of cereal grains was able to withstand the harsh storms. The resilient grasses always sprang back when the sky cleared and the sun returned. Benito had no qualms whatsoever about being here. Even the small tree he carried seemed delighted to reach its new home. When Talbot came to greet him, his skin dark and decorated with 100 tattoos of his impressive life accomplishments, Benito felt as if he had known the aged man all his life. Talbot embraced the young man with skinny arms. "I thank you for coming, Benito, and the trees thank you." He touched the small new treeling from Theroc as if greeting it. Benito smiled. "The Corvus Landing colonists would not want to be without a green priest. You have spoiled them." Talbot laughed. Even his gums were dark green. "The settlers don't use my services all that much, but having access to Telink and the immediate news I bring gives their colony a certain status in the Hansa." "Ah, status. I am the second son of the rulers of Theroc. Do you think they'll be able to handle so much importance?" Talbot led his younger comrade away from the colony's small spaceport, which was not much more than a paved clearing used as a flea market and meeting place when no ships were due to land. "They'll get over it soon enough, and then you'll want to go back to your fancy fungus reef city. Why would you want to be a monk when you can live as a king?" Talbot was joking, but he seemed truly concerned about the possibility. "I am leaving them in your care, Benito." "Don't worry about that. My first and truest dedication is to the trees. I want to live here, to read to the trees, to help the grove flourish. I won't flinch from getting my hands dirty if I need to help the colonists. I'm just grateful to be serving a valid purpose." Talbot walked in contemplative silence for a few moments, then turned back with a genuine smile on his dark face. "I know, Benito. Everything I've learned about you from the world trees tells me that my grove and the colonists are safe in your hands." He increased his pace. "Let us go quickly before the mayor and 1,000 colonists want to welcome you, introduce themselves, and tell you stories about me." "Plenty of time for that later," Benito said. "For now, after being so long in space, I would rather see the trees you've planted." With a spring in his step, the aged priest